All right. Hi, Joe. Hi, Cheryl. Thank you so much for joining me here today on Vonvo.com. Today's date is April 6, 2013. We're here to discuss gay rights in America. I just want to go over two quick ground rules before we get started. The first is that right now this conversation is being recorded, and after the conversation is completed, I'll be uploading this video to YouTube, to the internet. Is that okay with both of you?
Yeah, sure. Fine.
Okay, great. And our second item to bring up is that here at Vonvo, we're all about our discussions staying both civil and valuable, and we don't want there to be any personal attacks against anyone. Are you both fine with that ground rule?
Yes.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, great. So then, would each of you mind just giving a quick background of yourself for anyone who watches this video later on? Just a quick background of yourself and why you're so passionate about this issue. And Cheryl, you can go first, and then Joe.
I'm a proud Southern woman who believes in God, family, and country, and individual rights. And I think that the individual rights in the Constitution are extremely important.
Great. And Joe?
The reason I'm passionate about this is that I truly believe that the government should stay out of the business of marriage.
Perfect.
Completely stay out.
And Joe?
Yeah, my name is Joe. I'm an organizer in Phoenix, Arizona. Gay, Democrat, liberal activist. Gay rights is kind of one of the pantheon of issues for me. Gay rights hits specifically very close to home because as a gay man, I want my full equality. Like, I believe in equality under law, and I think that needs to apply to all of us.
Great. So, Joe, with the recent events that have taken place regarding this subject, can you kind of give us your overall analysis on where this issue, sort of stands right now?
On gay marriage specifically?
Yeah.
Obviously the big sort of movement politically speaking is with the DOMA case and the Prop 8 case currently sitting at the Supreme Court. Prop 8, from what I understood and from what I could read of the notes from the courtroom and what have you, it looks to me like Justice Kennedy is looking for a way to kick this out of the courtroom and will gladly take the standing option to let the lower court decision stand, strike down Prop 8 as a one-state solution under the Animas decision from the California court. I fully expect that Windsor decision to stand, though, and to be rid of the federal definition of marriage once and for all, which would be a great thing for all of us. You figure at that point, if you can no longer take back rights at the polls, if you can no longer sort of get around the concept of equality under the law, at that juncture, the only thing that's left is the full faith and credit clause. And you're going to end up with, I think, over the next 5 to 10 years, the almighty sue-off between the states, right? Of like those states that offer those marriage licenses, producing these marriage licenses that are then poured into all of these other states that are then forced through the courts to have to recognize gay marriage with one or not. I really think that those two cases are going to be pivotal. That if they fall the way I expect them to, that's it. We'll finally win on this issue, and it'll be a done deal in 5 to 10 years.
Right, and Cheryl?
It's interesting that you bring up DOMA in reference to SCOTUS. What SCOTUS is currently, what's under discussion and with SCOTUS, limited in scope, so notwithstanding what SCOTUS does not do. And therein lies my issue. Is that I still go back that the government really has no business being in the business of marriage. In and of itself, by defining what it is, it's being disrespectful towards all citizens of the United States. Because we are the core of our Constitution, no matter what the local politician or the senators do, the core of our Constitution and God give God-given rights, and the Constitution states that. And
No, it doesn't.
The government should go in there and qualify who meets the criteria for that. Now, my personal belief is marriage is between a man and a woman, but that is my personal belief, and that is my relationship with my religion. As I would hope people would respect that aspect, I also respect others. And so I truly believe that everyone is equal. No one is a second class. No one should ever think that they're a second class citizen of this country. And so the government.
So you're not arguing for the skim milk marriages.
Pardon me?
So you're not arguing for, as Ginsburg called them, skim milk marriages. It's all or nothing for you, right?
No, it takes time, as you said. It does take time for people to understand this process and to understand. And there are so many people in the United States that really understand the core of what our Constitution is.
Mm-hmm.
Above and beyond all else, we have these rights, and it's the government's job to protect those rights, not to make more right. So,
right. I mean, and that's what's laid out in the Ninth Amendment. Just because the rights are enumerated does not mean that the enumeration is exhaustive. I guess I'm going to ask you to fall back 10 and punt for me on one specific point, because I want to clarify it before I pick it up as an argument. On what you're talking about in terms of our Constitution saying that we have God-given rights, our Constitution does not state that we have God-given rights. That's the Constitution. That's the Declaration. I'm assuming you mean that in the same sense that I would mean that, speaking of God-given rights, of these are rights that are yours because you are a person, not yours because your government says you can have them, correct?
Correct. I agree with that.
Okay, good. Then on that, we're agreed.
I agree with that statement 100%. The government gets involved in marriage on I believe, strictly on a financial issue and on trying to dictate morality. And let me for a moment take you back to the state of Utah could not become a state until they banned polygamy. That was the government trying to tell a group of people that if you want to be part of us, you can't do that.
What does polygamy have to do with gay marriage? Like, we're still, same-sex marriages, we're still talking about the union of two people. We're still talking about a contract between two consenting adults, not multiple consenting adults. Like, this is the construction of the contract, that these two people bind themselves together. Not themselves, 4, 5, 6, 7 selves, two. Now, if we're going to argue about if we're going to argue federal powers to define marriage or define anything, then realistically, the federal government has no power whatsoever to define anything whatsoever. At which point, you have to toss DOMA. And as long as we continue to tie things to this very specific license, so we're not talking financials, right? Like, yes, there is the obvious Windsor decision, of things like inheritance taxes, things like health insurance taxes that directly hit the pocketbook. This is the sort of the red letter issue, if you will, that everybody's aware of. But there's literally hundreds, something to the effect of 1,400 civil rights that go along with marriage. We're talking the ability for you to decide whether or not your partner gets life support or is allowed to die peacefully. That's something that in most states, in all but the 8 that recognize same-sex marriage, if I have a same-sex partner who's dying of AIDS on a bed somewhere, I can't sign the DNR, even if we've already had that conversation. If his mother, who he may not have spoken to for years, decides, oh no, take heroic efforts, do everything it takes. Like, that's the sort of thing that you start talking about when you get into marriage, and what goes along with that license and that legally recognized definition is it's not just the money. It's the ability to define your family, to define your household, to define your life as you see fit. It's your own pursuit of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness that's on the line there.
And
If federal government is going to be involved, then the only involvement the federal government can possibly take is that equal protection clause, is the 14th Amendment, is the states can't take this away from you because they don't like your decision.
Well, now that's interesting, but I hold that on Virginia v. Loving, and let's address the legal
Yes.
issue. We'll get to Virginia v. Loving.
Certainly.
But the issues that you bring up, the rights of a partner, whomever, there are legal documentation that, yes, and I tell you this because as
I'm going to call malarkey on that right there. Because all that legal documentation doesn't survive the grave the way that a marriage license does, for one. And for two, why should I, because I am gay, have to go through a mountain of paperwork instead of just the one license? That's not equal protection under the law. That's straight up violation of my 14th Amendment rights. That is the state deciding, that is the state, not the federal government, the state intervening in my rights and deciding, no, you can't have these because we don't like who you chose to enter this contract with, so we're not going to recognize that contract. I mean, living wills are great, medical directives are great, powers of attorney are great. They all have their limitations in ways that a marriage license, that specific piece of documentation, does not. It's still inferiority. It is still skim milk bites.
I respectfully disagree with that. I think that there are legal.
But I'd ask you for proof.
We're not making judgment on. I'm not making judgment or saying anything about the ability, because that's the actual civil union or marriage discussion. To me, it is twofold. There is everyone. No matter. It doesn't matter. This inherent right to be happy in a loving relationship, not
life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness.
Absolutely, but notwithstanding, I mean, and for me, that is marriage between a man and a woman. But I also respect.
Okay, so you would be okay with me abusing that relationship to get advantage of the tax relationships, which I can do as a gay man, which would bring me some degree of happiness to abuse that statute.
Well,
to get those tax benefits, to get those write-offs.
That's exactly my point. Why? And I don't mean to diminish the same-sex marriage or civil union, either one. But what I'm saying is that inherently, I find those financial rights and gains wrong, because what the government is doing is taking right now a class of people, a heterosexual marriage, and they are setting these people apart from the rest of the nation and denying them financial rights that should be to everyone. Now, to understand that, the government has for lack of a better term, they had skin in the game when they were making all of these marriage rules and rights, and what they give it, they can take away as far as taxes. So we kill the tax code basically, and then everyone is on equal footing.
Well, okay, but back at the larger tax code conversation, because that's not what we're here to discuss. I mean, the tax code for our purposes, we just have to accept as a reality in the world. By the same token,
for married people,
it's a financial gain to the straight married couple. It is damage to the right. So then, either A, government ends giving marriage licenses altogether, and we are all stuck with, but at that juncture, we are all stuck with, when you're on your deathbed, Cheryl, when it's you, God, and your partner, your mother, marriage, is going to decide what happens and whether you live or die, what comfort you get at the end of your life, what care you get at the end of your life, and what your funeral arrangements are, not your husband. Those are the sorts of things that marriage comes with. It's not all about the money. There's a lot of intangibles there that have nothing to do with that tax bill, that have nothing to do with the student loan benefits, with the inheritance benefits, with just the marriage benefits alone, that have zero to do with the fact that if you are a same-sex partner, your health insurance is taxed, and it's not if you're an opposite-sex partner. All of that financial piece of it is well and good, but there's this whole slew of civil rights here that you are diminishing by prioritizing that financial incentive. It's those individual civil rights that I am more concerned with. Like, I
don't mean to diminish anyone.
Then let me challenge you on this. If the government exits the business of issuing or recognizing marriage licenses writ large, what do you do with that whole litany of civil rights benefits that are currently assigned to marriage licenses? Like, how do you get those as any couple at that point, or do we just throw that whole structure to the wind?
Why do we grant those civil rights through our federal government or states to one group over another? One group over another. Why can't? And let me give you this example. My son has been best friends, two of his buddies in kindergarten, college, well in their 30s, and they all live together. They are heterosexuals, but they all live together. Why can't they have a contract with the same rights? 30. At the same rights as a. Why is one select group, i.e., gays, straights, and you give them the right of marriage? So it's. And I'm sorry if the financial aspect sounds.
But fall back 10 and punt on that. If you get away from, if the DOMA definition dies, your son can marry whoever the hell he pleases. And if that's his best friend from kindergarten and it's an asexual relationship, well, they're happy. That's his pursuit of happiness. He is welcome to enter into that contract as he pleases. The problem is that DOMA definition.
Pardon me?
Pardon you?
Why can't the three of them enter into a civil union contract that benefits the three? And as an example, one of the three has far better. The reason I put this out is that I believe it's an important question to ask.
I believe it's a red herring of an argument. No. As far as why can't the 3, the 4, the 12, the 30, very simply put, there is a limit of how far those benefits can extend. Like, when you're talking about marriage and you're talking about life or death decisions, you are making a contract with a person that knows you so well that they could, in that split-second decision, act and function as you. A committee can't do that. I mean, that's a basic concept. I mean, take everything else aside. An elephant is a mouse designed by committee. If you're going to ask for these 5 people to get together in a room while you're laying dying on the ER and have a debate of what to do, of whether to, seek organ transplant, or do we or don't we do blood transfusions, or do we use a artificial means to keep you alive, that's decision by committee. That marriage contract, that specific type contract, privileges that person singular to act as you, because that person singular is supposed to be of your same one mind. You got a long uphill battle to convince me or any reasonable person, I would say, that you could get that same sort of snap decision, that sort of same one-mindedness out of a committee.
I beg to differ with you, because I, in my personal life, do have more than one person. Beyond my husband, I also have my sister, who legally, in conjunction with my husband, make decisions if I no longer medically can make those decisions. And she has it is not just the marriage part. I personally...
Cheryl, do you have a medical directive that orders that?
Pardon me?
Is there a medical directive that orders that?
I have a medical, yes.
Okay, okay.
I have a medical directive like that, but I have legal documents that go beyond that, granting certain specific rights that must be worked in conjunction in conjunction with my medical care. And I have granted those rights to 2 people, for a multitude of reasons. And I've been through this way too long. And so what I'm saying is, by creating another class of marriage.
But I'm not asking for another class of marriage. I am asking to take the existing class of marriage. I am not asking for special rights. I am asking for equal rights. I am asking to take the ability to take a non-blood related relative and pull them into my naturalized family and extend that to whoever I damn well please as my inherent right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
And I agree with you 100%.
Well and good, and I understand where you come from of your situation with you and your husband and your sister, but my ex-partner, as he's in the hospital with leukemia, I had nurses usher me out of the room to give him information because I was his roommate, legally speaking, and couldn't get that information. And no documentation existed for him to persistently give me that right under Arizona state law. That conversation had to happen every damn time we were at the hospital.
And I would be pissed off about that, because when I worked, I was a legal officer in the 80s.
But Cheryl, this is you and I speaking. This is you and I speaking as clearly people who have studied and understand the law and are well acquainted with the messed upness that is the current American legal structure and how we do things like family rights, like human rights, like civil rights, of how fundamentally wrong and chaotic we make these moments in our lives that you need that clarity, that you want the people that you have chosen to be your loved ones in your life to make those decisions, to stand up for you, to go to bat for your rights. You and I get that. You get the average middle class modern American citizen that doesn't understand that doesn't have that mountain of paperwork, that doesn't know what their rights are, that when they're confronted with a doctor or a nurse in an emergency room that tells them, I'm sorry, we have to contact their next of kin, and closes that door, you've just closed that door on them entirely. That's the piece that needs to be gotten rid of.
I understand your point, but I have sat in many of a hospital room in the 80s in San Diego, drafting wills and watching the nurse not allow the partner in, and seeing that young man at his end of life not having the same right, and I found that then, as I find it today, irreprehensible. But if we had equal rights for all citizens, not heterosexual married, gay married, single, if we had that, if we really truly believed, and Lord knows, I'm a conservative, and maybe a lot of people will get a little miffed about this. The hospital should not be making these decisions to say who can or cannot. If you have the document, and I understand 100%, if it's a case, you don't know when you're going to end up at a hospital or a car accident or anything else. But to deny the fundamental rights of a partner in that instance is deplorable.
Agreed.
I don't think it has, but it doesn't go to the. And I think we come at it maybe in two different avenues, but I think that we're sort of in the same.
Well, you and I come at it from the classic liberal and conservative standpoints of the liberal wants the constructive solution of, call it is, more government. The conservative wants the conservative solution of less. If I understand you correctly, you would want government to completely exit that. But what I'm asking, the pragmatic question that I want you to address, If that's what government does, then how does that hospital decide who gets in the room and who doesn't? Especially if you are incapacitated to the point that you cannot speak. Like, how do you have that conversation in the ER in San Diego? Much less, how do you have that conversation in the ER in Phoenix or Salt Lake or any of the numerous, more conservative cities that would be more apt to force that relationship out the door?
I don't have a full answer for you on that. I don't know the answer.
And see, for me, the sort of logical stopgap is, yes, the conversation that you were talking about needs to take place. Like, there is this whole vast swath of human rights, family rights law that doesn't get picked up, that doesn't get touched, that doesn't get discussed, because it makes us all squirm to think about the fact that someday you're going to die. But in the interim, there is a class of people that is visibly, obviously being denied their rights, whose life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness are abrogated at the most crucial moments of their life. That the thing that has stopped that from happening for everybody else is this one particular piece of law. So until the rest of that conversation can sort of ripen on the vine, have that, at least as the stopgap measure, you have to take that thing that has protected everyone else and extend it to the entire 360 million, or however many of us there are Americans. Like, I don't understand. I don't understand why, if the ultimate goal is government exits marriage, if in the interim government hands out marriage licenses like there can, fine. If in the interim federal government hands out marriage licenses like there can be, what difference does it make if the government's going to get out of that business anyway? Now, if you're talking federal government gets out of this and we leave these decisions to the states, I would remind you how well it has gone in the past to leave civil rights up to the states.
Oh, I'm only too acutely aware of how that.
I can't see you, but you sound old enough to remember burning crosses, Cheryl. We will not leave civil rights.
And I'm sorry you can't see my image. Sometimes the video works, sometimes it doesn't. But
sometimes it doesn't.
Let's just.
But no, so we are though of one mind that federal government should get its nose the hell out of marriages altogether. Like, Washington D.C. should fit itself in Washington D.C. DOMA is bad law. DOMA is unconstitutional. DOMA is government putting its business where its business has no business being.
I think that I'm going to agree that DOMA. I'm of the opinion that DOMA is unconstitutional. And the problem is when the discussion of DOMA comes up, a lot of people don't understand. They go, how could Clinton sign that? Very easily. It all boils down to money. Hawaii had passed the same-sex, but they also wanted federal rights. Every remedy rights that came with marriage, they wanted equality. So the federal government, i.e. Clinton and at the time, I know that there were Republicans involved, I'm not arguing that. This was an issue that was this ideology of DOMA was financially based because they didn't want to run on all of these programs and they weren't ready for it. The federal government's always 10 steps behind where society is already there. And if you look at the statistics today, there are more people that say, well, hey, I don't agree with it, but why should my opinion be set upon someone else? I think that if you ask people across the United States, they would say the same things. I believe this way, but it doesn't mean that I should impose my beliefs on another person. Because I'm Catholic, I might disagree with the Jewish guy down the street or the Buddhist or on whatever reason. Or I just disagree because today I don't like you're wearing a purple shirt. And I'm not trying to make light of the conversation. It's just that, again, the government needs to. The government tries to legislate.
But DOMA was not. But DOMA, the legislation that is DOMA, does not, case in point, drawing off the actual record from Congress, does not come from a place of fiscal responsibility.
Oh, I know.
Read the testimony.
Physical fear.
It came from a visceral fear of homosexuals. It came from a hatred of homosexuals. I mean, the title alone of the Defense of Marriage Act, that they had to somehow defend marriage from the gays. Bill Clinton signed that for whatever reasons Bill Clinton did, and frankly, as a liberal, I can't Bill Clinton. But at the end of the day, okay, something else we agree on. But I mean, at the end of the day, at the time, at that moment in time, there was no political reality that Bill Clinton could have vetoed the damn thing. Period. Wouldn't have happened. Would have crucified it. Would have been far more bloodshed than it was worth, which unfortunately the gay community is entirely too used to being told, not yet, not yet, not yet, not yet. But we're at a point where we're not going to be told not yet anymore. This is a thing that has mattered to us for the last 20 years. This is a battle that we've been fighting for the last 20 years, to have our relationships recognized. And to have with states like Arizona deciding to just keep running it on the ballot until they get their way, when the obvious truth of it is, we don't vote on rights. That's why we call them rights and not privileges. Like, the state of Arizona is a perfect case in point, that one year we defeat a gay marriage ban and the next year we pass it because the same damn people didn't get what they wanted the first time, so they just keep going back. This is not a way to rule a country. This is not a way to rule a state. At the end of the day, those civil rights, they're intact and they're sacrosanct, or they aren't. If they are, then the states don't have a right to abrogate, and that is the proper role of the federal government, to put its nose in there and tell the states, no, you can't forbid this type of marriage that everybody else allows. No, you've set this thing up that it's going to be a contract between two consenting adults. These are two consenting adults. Let them sign the contract. We can have the broader conversation of how far open does that push. At what point are we marginalizing other populations? But there's the red-letter issue that has to be dealt with first. And I mean, it's the same march of civil rights that we've seen time and time. And again, who knows? Maybe next it's transsexuals, maybe next it's polygamy, maybe next it's about abolition altogether, maybe it's none of the above. The next logical step in that progression, I should be able to marry who I want, when I want, for why I want, and I'm sorry, my federal and state governments both can F off in terms of their ability to decide the appropriateness of that relationship. Like, there's no purpose there. They don't have any overriding interest to stop me, be it federal government or state government, from entering into that contract.
And I understand your point. And I don't think the federal government should.
So then, okay, agreed. We both agree that the federal government has no business dictating the terms of marriage outside of equal protection under the law. What about the states? What about the states? What about the states that have passed constitutional amendments banning same-sex marriages? Do those fly under equal protection under the law? Do those fly under the federal constitution? Or do we throw federal primacy out the window now, too?
Interesting question. I think I have a tendency to take things to the core of the issue without dealing with the emotional aspect as to how.
And on this, I encourage you to, yeah.
But that's the way that I have a tendency to look at everything. I just bring it down to, and the state. There's no very nice way to say this. The state that when the people of the state make a decision, I think that the state's rights should not be superseded by the federal government, where the state doesn't violate federal law in its purity. Because
okay,
if you look at let's just use DOMA.
Let's not, because DOMA's federal statute. Let's use the state constitutional ban.
Well, see, but it's important, because if we both disagree that DOMA is wrong and the federal government shouldn't determine what marriage is, then the federal government also, if we follow that line of logic, has no right to tell us what it is.
Wrong. If the federal government is not defining marriage, period, like if there is not a federal definition of marriage, then legally speaking, the construct that we all have to fall back on is the full faith and credit clause of the United States Constitution that requires states to recognize licenses from one another, and the 14th Amendment that forbids states from taking rights away from their citizens. I mean, the logic there is the same. The logic there is the same yellow brick road that takes us to the end of Jim Crow, that takes us to the end of anti-miscegenation, that takes us right back to Loving v. Virginia. Just because the majority decides that the minority does not have their rights does not mean the majority gets to actually strip the minority of their rights. That's not the way we do it in this country. That's never been the way we do it in this country. We don't vote on rights here.
I mean, that's why, to the contrary, that's why we have elections. That's why we, yes, it is.
But elections do not determine your human rights. Period. Simply put.
The government legislates that, and that's not right.
Then, okay, then if that's not right, then it falls on the courts to strike those things down when they happen, does it not?
The Supreme Court should only deal with that is confined to the Constitution.
And the Constitution stipulates through the 14th Amendment that the states may not strip citizens of their rights. Also correct?
That is correct.
Then, if the states are stripping any given minority of their civil and or human rights, does SCOTUS not have responsibility under the 14th Amendment to strike them down every time those decisions reach their chambers?
Only if, I will concede that point only, and that would only work if the individual states were forced to define marriage. And it goes back to, the only way that works is if the federal government defines what marriage is. Because then there is no right, even under the 14th Amendment.
So let's fast forward. Okay, so let's fast forward to July. Let's assume that I am right. The Windsor decision is upheld, and and Section 3 of DOMA, the federal definition, is dead as doornails. At that point, is it not but a matter of time before those 32 state constitutional amendments banning same-sex marriage are all shoved into the ash heap of history?
Well, time can only tell us that. I don't think that we can dictate time will tell. But I am seriously doubtful that the individual states' rights on this issue, be it right or wrong.
The individual states may not trammel the rights of the individuals.
But I understand that. The thing is that the definition of marriage, the individual states determine what that is, and they will go by their standing laws and the standing beliefs of their citizens within it. I'm not saying they're right. I'm just saying as an argument on a constitutional legal aspect that won't fly. So it's not right. These are what you're saying is that the will of a smaller group is to be. It's not right. You want the will of a smaller group to be imposed on the will of the majority.
No. I am saying your right to swing your arm ends where my face starts. I am saying it's the same reason that you're going to see the Prop 8 decision struck for standing of those citizens bringing that court case against gay marriage don't have any damages. The other side that makes the Defense of Marriage Act and we need to defend marriage from the gays, what are you losing? Nothing. At the end of the day, there is nothing lost. There is no standing. There is no damage. Like, this is a core legal concept, and you can't just willy-nilly sue because, well, I don't agree with you. That's not the way law works. Law is defined in logic and by rights and by legislation.
The will of the people in Prop 8 what the overwhelming will of the people was passed.
And if you ran that same legislation today, it would fail miserably. And it's not overwhelming will of the people.
It is not. The issue before the court isn't what would happen if it happened today.
And the issue before the court is not what happened at the ballot box either. The issue before the court is what flies under the constitutions of the federal government and the state of California. And Prop 8